just through their normal course of business, it would require something like 2 million patent lawyers just to keep up with all the software patents out there. I mean, the system doesn't scale at all.
What's interesting, when I worked at Microsoft, I was told explicitly, do not look at patents, because if you do get sued and you lose, your judgment is 3 times more if you knowingly infringe on a patent. and so the incentive is don't look at them at all, because that way we won't make any stupid mistakes like that.
But there's no way to really look at a patent and determine whether you're going to be infringing on it, because they're just so vague, they're so convoluted, it's so hard to understand that, and it's just so the system as we have it today is pretty unworkable. And what we need is a non-aggression pact on the part of all the Silicon Valley companies that they won't engage in offensive software patent litigation, because the alternative would be the end of innovation unless we get
but it sounds like
patent litigation reform.
It sounds like Yahoo wouldn't join this kind of pact.
Because they've decided that being a patent troll is a viable turnaround strategy, and Silicon Valley needs to convince them that this is a bad idea, because if other people follow suit...
I don't see it as a turnaround strategy. I see it as a bleeding the turnip strategy, right? Bleeding the stone, get some more blood out of the stone or the turnip that's already drying out.
Right.
And there's other companies I can think of that are in the same position, that they're not going to be able to pull out of their death spirals. RIM, Microsoft, right? Microsoft is at a huge turning point in its lifespan. And are they going to feel threatened at some point and start using those thousands of patents against everybody to make sure that their revenue numbers stay up?
Well, this is the big danger. This is what's ironic about software patents, is people claim that you need them to encourage innovation, but it's always the companies that are most threatened, most sort of obsolete, most on their way, the least innovative companies, which are always the ones enforcing them, or it's the patent trolls, who obviously aren't on the side of innovation. And it's the most innovative companies, the ones who are the most disruptive, the most doing the most interesting things, who are on the receiving end of this litigation.
So Mark Cuban wrote that he hopes that Yahoo wins. He was saying that ironically, because he was hoping that the industry just goes into a total freak out and changes these laws and pushes the industry. It forces the politicians to change these kinds of laws, right?
Right.
And then you're out there saying you won't hire any Yahoo employees after. Well, tell me what you said.
Right. Well, so I've been iterating in my proposal. I started with the stick approach, and now I'm trying the carrot. So the carrot is we've offered a $25,000 signing bonus for any Yahoo employee who joins Yammer in the next 60 days, and I would encourage all of Silicon Valley to follow suit, because it would be a good way to get Yahoo's employees to reassess why they're working there and whether they want to be associated with a patent troll. I think that that over time, regardless of, I also had tweeted that maybe we should blacklist any Yahoo employee who doesn't leave within 60 days, and I backed off that because we really need to hold the people responsible for the decision accountable, and that would be senior management, maybe the lawyers involved and the board members. But frankly, their names are mud in Silicon Valley at this point anyway, so telling people not to hire them is kind of like telling people not to snort rat poison. I mean, they probably could figure it out on their own. But anyway, I mean, I do think it would be worthwhile if the employees of Yahoo were to kind of go through some introspection about why they're working there. It's not a particularly innovative company to begin with. When's the last time they launched a really innovative, great product? And now that they're entering patent trolling as a line of business, do you really want to associate yourself with that? I do think a stigma will attach to Yahoo employees the longer they work there.
And that was already underway, right? When you're in a death spiral and everybody knows that Yahoo's in decline, the longer you stay at that kind of company, the harder it is to be seen as somebody valuable to another company, right?
Yeah, but the irony is, so we've interviewed a bunch of people. We're getting a lot more resumes now since I tweeted my offer. There are a lot of great engineers at Yahoo. There are great people at Yahoo, and so I think now a lot of people objected to my initial proposal because they thought it would be like a hardship. What about all the people with families or on some visa, or they'll be thrown out of the country and all that stuff? And so that is why I did kind of modify my proposal, but I don't think the reason why most people are at Yahoo is hardship. You know, the hiring environment in Silicon Valley has never been hotter. There's a war for talent. It's real. It's intense. This is a great time to be looking for another job, not just in engineering, but in sales or really almost any other position. So my guess is that the reason why most people are at Yahoo is inertia. And so anything we can do to get them to kind of wake up you know, and think about whether there's somewhere else they might want to work, that would be a good thing. Only to, you know, only to the extent that the reason I'm doing this again is to try and put pressure on Yahoo's management to drop the suit and and for Silicon Valley to send the message that this is not okay.
I wonder if that message is going to be heard, because I assume they knew what this kind of blowback was going to be. And
I'm not sure about that.
Really?
Well, I don't think we should assume that.
Okay.
That they knew exactly. Because I do think.
Are you saying we can't assume that they're smart people and have thought things through?
Well, it's possible that they thought, you know, companies have sued each other for patent. Yeah.
There's other ones out there, right? And,
yeah. So they may not have thought what they were doing was such a big deal, or that it would be perceived as so opportunistic. My sense of how this is different from previous disputes, like let's take, a lot of people have asked me, well, are you going to boycott Apple too because of their dispute with Google? My sense there is that that's not really a patent dispute. They're aggrieved about something else, right? You know, Eric Schmidt was on their board, and then Steve Jobs got really upset when they launched Android, and so there's a larger dispute there, and they're kind of throwing the kitchen sink at each other, and part of that happens to be using these patents. I don't think it's a purely opportunistic thing.
It's also easier to understand a patent when it comes to hardware,
right,
than when it comes to vague software ideas.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially ones that probably have existed in the past. You know,
right.
I've seen so many software patents where I knew that idea existed before the patent was written. You know?
Yeah, and that's an important point. Is I'm specifically speaking out against software patents because you know, I believe that we should protect code. But code is already protected by copyright law. You can't just steal someone's code. But when you're talking about trying to patent what code is intended to accomplish, it's so vague. I mean, you're basically just patenting an idea, and it's very.
It's like trying to patent a movie because of the emotion it causes, right? Oh,
right.
I'm going to make you cry in this movie, so I'm going to patent that.
Right.
Know?
Well, it's
and there's 1,000 ways to make you cry, but you know, it's so vague.
Right. Well, the way that Silicon Valley advances is through layers of innovation. Yeah. So people are constantly riffing off each other. So you have, you know, Google wasn't the first search engine; they just had a better idea for a search engine. You know, Facebook wasn't the first social network, but it was the best one. And then, you know, they kind of invented this idea of a news feed. Yeah. And then Twitter came along and took that, but took it to a whole nother level. And then we came along and took social networking and applied it to the enterprise. And so there's this constant process of people riffing off each other's ideas. Yeah. And if we try to, you know, create a lawsuit every time that happens, it's going to absolutely stifle innovation in Silicon Valley. I mean, this is the way that science works in general, is that people are constantly coming up with new ideas that are layered on top of the old ideas. And if you try to then say that the people who come up with every single idea are entitled to a royalty on every future idea that learns from what they did, I mean, you'll just, it's first of all, it's impracticable, but
could you imagine doing that with music, for instance? You know,
or just science. I mean, should Newton have been able to patent gravity? You know, and basically every future invention that
but software is closer to music. It's a creative endeavor.
Right, exactly.
It's not a hard, you know.
That's right. So somebody learns from, exactly. So it's
people argue with me there, but it's like poetry. You know, it's like, how do you?
Right, and you have copyright to protect that. So somebody just can't lift it. But if there's an idea that someone comes up with, I mean, again, this idea that Yahoo can patent the idea of a website with advertising, I mean, it's just absurd. From a policy standpoint, there's no good reason to be granting these patents. So every patent is essentially a government-granted monopoly. That's the right way to look at it. In general, government should be in the business of busting up monopolies, or at least reducing their influence, not granting new ones. And so the government has basically granted Yahoo 10,000 mini monopolies, and they could do enormous damage to Silicon Valley if they decided to prosecute all of those things. You know, there are areas where I'm I'm very much in favor of having patents. So, for instance, in the pharma industry, if someone spends $1 billion bringing a new drug to market, you do want to be able to protect that with a patent, because otherwise, the second it comes to market, someone will copy it.
But it's expensive to come up with software. You have 250 employees here.
Not really though, and that's the thing is you don't really need a big investment to write new software. So, it's and the question is, from a policy standpoint, do we want? Right now, we have this great dynamic in the world of software. There are feature wars, right? People are constantly fighting to one up each other, to innovate, to come up with new features. After some period of time, those features get copied by their competitors, and they're always trying to advance the state of the art. Now, should that process stop? Because whenever people release a new feature, they can essentially patent it. Now no one can copy it. It would just bring all software innovation to a standstill. The consumers really benefit from this dynamic.
Absolutely.
And so the question to ask is, would you get more or less innovation in the world of software if we were to not have software patents or reform the patent software? I mean, almost certainly you would get more innovation. In the pharma world, in the world of drugs, if you were to get rid of patents, you would actually have less innovation. You would have fewer drugs coming to market because no one would be willing to spend $1 billion in R&D anymore. But in the case of software, I actually think you get more innovation. You'll certainly get less if we keep going down this path of patent trolls, or now large software companies becoming patent trolls. I mean, this is what's really scary about the Yahoo suit.
I just talked with a lawyer who won a lawsuit against Microsoft just last week, after 7 years of fighting it. And he had fingerprinted a way to know, or he came up with a method to look at the hardware of your PC and know it was yours. And it's a pretty unique, because he looks at the electrons that are going through the hardware, and he can actually tell that Apple is different than my Apple.
Right.
And Microsoft stole it, and they lost, and it was several $100 million. Is that an appropriate place for patent? Because that's actually something. Yeah. Something breakthrough, something new, something that took a lot of thought, and a lot of engineering, and it was a legitimately new idea. Right. It was an idea that Microsoft didn't have, and they were in a partnership, and they outright stole it. That's why they lost the lawsuit. But
so it sounds to me like there's something going on there besides just the patents. But what I would say is there's a spectrum with, I would say, like drugs, pharma products on one extreme and software on the other. And the hardware would probably be somewhere in the middle. It probably does deserve protection. I mean, the type of factors I would look at is, first, it can't just be an idea. It must be an execution of an idea in order to be protected. I
really hate the trolls because of that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one thing to have a patent, even a legitimate, drug. If you're just going to sit on it and then sue everybody else who has.
Yeah, you should be able to patent an idea. You should only be able to patent a particular execution of an idea.
And I wish our law would say that you're only allowed to sue somebody if you're actually building it.
Yes, you should have to be a practicing entity, not a non-practicing entity. So, I mean,
that would stop some of the Yahoo patents right away, because they're not actually using some of those patents.
Yeah, so there should be no damages to a non-operating entity or to a company that isn't actually using this technology. So that would be a good reform as well. But I also think that there should have to be a very substantial, R&D type investment you should have to make in a product that we essentially want to protect, because it's so easily copied once it comes to market. I mean, that's really why you need patents, is that the first copy of something is incredibly expensive to make, but the second and all subsequent copies are very cheap to make. And so if you don't protect the first one, then people will copy it.
Could Siri be patented then? Because Siri took, I don't know, the SRI lab in Menlo Park spent hundreds of millions